Hi guys, and welcome to day 3 of my daily diary. Today I'm going to be talking about the inner critic. The inner critic, what is that? It is the voice that's in your head that tells you that you are not good enough, that you have nothing to say, that what you want to share isn't worth sharing. And it's the voice that, if we let it, can take over and can take control. And I had a conversation with a friend today about the inner voice that goes on and whose voice that actually is and why we let that voice have power. And for all of my life, I have had an inner voice, a voice that wants to be heard, and a voice that is super critical and quite unforgiving if I make mistakes or if I do things that perhaps with hindsight weren't the best choices. I have been known to give myself a really hard time about that. And talking to my friend about her inner voice has made me realise that I'm not the only one who has that experience, and that probably there are lots of us that have this voice that tells us what we can and can't do, whether we are or aren't worthy, and we believe the things that it says because it's part of our brain and it's in our head, and therefore it's the truth. And in the years of meditation that I've done, I've been doing meditation for 10 years now, I have realised that I'm not my voice. That voice inside my head is a voice that I can choose to listen to or choose to ignore, that I can quieten down or I can give it attention, and that I can actually play with it. I can be more open to letting it be there without having to resist it. But the interesting thing that I've found today is how much power we give to that voice. And the way that my experience of that is that for all of my life I've had anxiety, and I've struggled with showing up and feeling accepted. And today I shared my first video diary, and that was really uncomfortable for me. That took a huge amount of courage, because I talk about things in there that ordinarily I wouldn't really tell people about or talk about, but I felt it was important enough, and I felt what I was doing was important enough that I needed to share it, because ultimately this isn't really about me, this is about how my experiences might be able to help other people. And the voice in my head was telling me that no one wanted to hear what I had to say, I was going to look silly, and what would people think, and will people dislike me for sharing, will they think I'm depressing, so many thoughts. And if I allowed it to, that voice could take over, and I might not have shared that video today, and I might not have chosen to put myself out there and to be seen, and to potentially realise that I am acceptable and I am perfect as I am, and that what I tell myself isn't really true. And I guess I realised today the power of actually ignoring the voice. I've learnt lots of things in my coaching training and in all the things that I've done about how to manipulate the voice in your head. And when I say manipulate, really what I mean by that is the ability to focus in on that voice, let that voice be heard, let that voice have its say, to honour it, to thank it, to be grateful for it, because ultimately the critic that's in your head is just there to protect you. we are built for survival. That's how we're programmed. We will not put ourselves in harm's way, because ultimately that could mean our destruction. So as a result, we come up with coping mechanisms, and often what that means is that that voice in your head takes over and takes control and says, no, don't do that, it's too scary. Don't do that, you might get hurt. Don't do that, people won't accept you. And in the things that I've learned, and especially in my meditation practice, I've learned how fleeting the voices can be if we let them. It's like anything. If you give power to it, if you give attention to it, it becomes stronger, it gains momentum, and it takes over. And it's a bit like a rock or a pebble rolling down a hill that gains momentum and picks up stones and along the way, and eventually becomes this massive boulder that can create huge destruction. And in my meditation practice, I've learned how to allow my thoughts to be there, how to just acknowledge those thoughts. And I have a coping mechanism that allows me to take those thoughts, and my personal way is to roll those thoughts into a ball. So if I'm in a meditation practice and I find that my mind is really busy, and it doesn't even necessarily need to be negative busy, just thoughts about what I'm going to do that day, thoughts about what I've got to achieve, or where I'm going, or what I want in the future, or dreaming. But all of those things kind of get in the way of my meditation practice, get in the way of creating that stillness for myself. And when I'm able to channel into those thoughts, and I usually give them a picture, I usually kind of imagine them as little signs in neon lights, and I merge all those thoughts together, and I roll them up into a grey ball of like putty, like plasticine, and I roll them up, and I imagine pushing them out of my ear, and as they move out of my ear, they turn into butterflies. And that may sound strange. That may sound, it sounds a bit strange when I say it out loud, but in my head it makes complete sense. And the reason that I do that is because I understand that I am not my thoughts. My thoughts are not me. I am the person, the being that watches my thoughts, that witnesses my thoughts. And in that, it means that I can choose. I can choose to give the thoughts power, or I can choose to mould them, change them, adapt them, release them, and have a different experience. And if you've ever had an experience where you're intensely thinking about something, and let's say you're concentrating on something at work, and you're totally focused and you're totally in that zone, and someone will come and talk to you, and in that moment everything you were thinking about disappears because your attention is diverted. And thoughts are exactly the same. Just because they're thoughts and conversations that you have with yourself doesn't mean that they operate in any different way. You can focus your attention on something else. You can change what you think about or what you focus your attention on. Sometimes in my practice, in my meditation practice, I'll choose to repeat a mantra because that gives my brain a chance to focus on something. And sometimes I'll just focus on my breath. But all of the things that I do in my practice are just designed to allow me to give my brain a focus for its attention, and to allow me to create a stillness and a peace within myself that I otherwise probably wouldn't have. Because if I allowed my thoughts to get stronger, they would take over. And it's really quite an easy thing for me to do now, and that doesn't mean I don't experience difficult thoughts and difficult critical thinking. I just know how to manage it in a different way. But at the same time, I'm just like everybody else, and I too experience moments of self-doubt, moments of insecurity and anxiety. And I guess what I want to say today is that you don't have to give your thoughts power, that the critic that's in your mind isn't necessarily right. Have you ever challenged what it's saying? Have you ever asked yourself whose voice that is? Where that comes from? Where do those thoughts come from? Sometimes in thinking about how your mind works and why it works the way it does, it gives you some ownership over your reactions and your thought processes, which then means that you've got the power to change it. So, yeah, I guess the message for today is like, what is it that your mind is telling you, and how would you want it to be different? If you could choose, what would you want it to say? I'm really glad that I was able to ignore the things that were going on in my head when I posted my video today. And I actually, because I've moved past that and because I found that courage to share regardless of my self-doubt, I actually don't mind what the outcome is. I don't mind what people say. I'm okay with that because I made that decision, and half the battle sometimes is hearing the thoughts and doing it anyway. You know, there's that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway, and it sounds like such a cliche, but it is true. If you can move past the things that you tell yourself, if you can move past the thinking and move past the anxiety and the self-doubt, so much is possible, so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And you know, it's an ongoing process for me. It's a day-to-day process of managing the way I think so that I have a better experience day to day, so that my thoughts are happier ones, more supportive ones, so that I can work with myself as a team instead of being in battle with myself all the time and in conflict with myself. Because conflict is where anxiety sits. Conflict is where we keep ourselves hidden for fear of what might happen so that we can protect ourselves and stop ourselves from getting hurt. And it's really valuable. Like, there are times when that's probably been really, really valuable, especially when we're children and we're exposed to things that we don't understand. We naturally have to protect ourselves. But as we get older and we have the benefit of an adult mind, and we understand ourselves better and we have better self-awareness, we can make different decisions, and we can choose to channel into different thoughts, to different beliefs, to different feelings. So I'm going to make sure that I pay more attention to my inner critic. I know how to have a good relationship with my inner critic, and the work I need to do is on strengthening that and on being consistent with that, because sometimes I get caught up in the story that I'm telling myself and I believe it to be true, and that's okay. That's where I'm at and that's where I need to be. But my goal, my intention is to pay more attention and not allow that to take over. And I hope that if you're watching this and you experience that, if you're someone that is watching this and doesn't experience that, then I salute you, because if you do experience it, you know that can be super draining and tiring and uncomfortable. So if you do experience that and you want something different, perhaps next time you catch yourself thinking in a way that you maybe would not speak to your friend. Like, that's been a really big thing for me, is, would I say this to my friend? Would I speak to my friends or my family in the way that I speak to myself? Chances are you maybe wouldn't. And if you wouldn't say it to your friend, then why would you say it to yourself? Because as I've said in my first video, like, you're the only person who lives your life and has your experiences. And if you want those experiences to be the best they can be, you have to make friends with yourself. And it can be done. Like, I didn't think it was possible, but it is possible because I have done it. I do it. I do on a regular basis. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I'm not. It is an ongoing process. Personal development, learning about yourself, all that sort of stuff. It's a lifelong journey. It's not a thing that you just pick up one day and you do a few things and then you're fixed. It's a thing that you have to invest time and energy and effort into. But ultimately, we're worth it. Like, that's the way I look at it. We're worth it. We're worth the time. We're worth the energy. We're worth the effort. We'd give it to our children. We'd give it to our families. We'd give it to our friends. So why wouldn't we give it to ourselves? We look after our bodies by doing exercise and eating well. So why wouldn't we look after our minds? And that's been a really great reminder today, and I'm hoping that if you're watching this and you do experience that maybe you'll think about what the voice is telling you and give a bit of attention to that, and hopefully something of what I've said might help you in that process. So that's the end of day 3, and I will see you tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm actually really quite enjoying talking. I love a chat. So yeah, have a lovely evening, and I will see you guys again tomorrow.